Many influencers and gurus have sung the praises of diversified businesses with lots of different streams of income. Dallas Mount is here today to help us think a little bit more critically about those ideas.
A simplified business is doing $3 million in sales, and we can break that business apart and put our finger on it within about 2 or 3 hours of working on it. I might sit down with a diversified business that's doing $200,000 in gross revenue, and 14 hours later, we still haven't figured out where things are coming from.
We'll also discuss strategies that will help us ensure better success with the direction of our businesses.
When you're looking at adding diversity, I think there's a really important testing question to put onto that. When this enterprise is up and running, it must produce a gross margin of at least X, or it's just a distraction.
All that and more on this episode 462 of the Working Cows podcast, brought to you by Ranch Right and C90 Ocean Minerals.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag studios. Very excited to be joined once again by Dallas Mount. Very thankful to Dallas Mount for kicking me off on this journey of starting the Working Cows podcast. Always a joy to have him back on to talk business and ranching and strategy and people management and all those things. And we often end up talking to Dallas about people management, but today we're going to talk to him about how do we handle our businesses and the strategies that we use to market and those things, and maybe even some ways that sometimes this gets pushed in a more challenging direction than it needs to. Sometimes the simplest businesses are the ones that are the most profitable. And so we'll talk to him about that after a word from our sponsor today, Ranch Right. There's nothing artificial about the intelligence of the team at Ranch Right. They're a group of super crunchers, accountants, HR advisors, and succession specialists with the knowledge and desire to provide you with actionable financials so you can build a profitable business that creates generational wealth. Having a team of people that live and breathe these topics beats the pants off taking a shot in the dark with the latest Silicon Valley large language model. Don't assume AI got it right. Enlist Ranch Right today so you can know that you have all the information you need to make the best decision for the future of your ranch. Head on over to ranchrightllc.com today to take advantage of their real world experience so you can have clarity and confidence in the future of your business. No robots were harmed in the making of this advertisement. Dallas, thanks for joining me again on the Working Cows podcast. Welcome back.
Thanks, Clay. Excited to be back on with you.
Yeah, very much. Always good to have you back, and always good to talk about something other than people management, because that's usually what I end up asking you to come and talk about. But so today we're thinking about diversity and thinking about it, from a different perspective, and kind of what are some of the things that are on your mind when it comes to issues of diversity and marketing and some of those things.
When it comes to ecological diversity, I am all in, right? When we look at, having diverse plant species and, diverse ecotypes and all those things, right? I am all in. When it comes to operational diversity and from an economic perspective, I think I might have what might be a different approach from some of your past guests, and maybe surprise people a bit with where we come down on this. But it's really from decades of having worked with producers and had the opportunity to look at what's going on inside their business from an economic perspective is where my comments are going to come from. So, so we hear a lot of people say, "Oh, we need more diversity in our businesses. We need more diversity in our farms and ranches in terms of enterprise diversity and what folks are doing," and I understand some diversity. But here's the issue is the businesses that we work with that do well tend to do 2 or 3 things really well and at scale. Okay, we many of the businesses that people would consider a diverse businesses, we don't see them working very well from an economic perspective. So ask me a question, and I can go deeper on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess my first question is, give me an example of a business that's doing 2 or 3 things really well. I mean, it's not like we've got cow-calf and underwater basket weaving. I'm guessing that these enterprises are related, right?
Oftentimes they are. Yeah, oftentimes they are. So, I mean, out west, it's probably going to be a cow-calf and maybe a haymaking business. And, we slam on haymaking businesses a lot, but there are some of those that are really working well. The person who's driving all new haymaking equipment to make 300 tons of hay, obviously that doesn't make sense, right? But if you're going to make hay, let's make a lot of hay, right? If we're going to be set up to do it. So that might be one that works well, would be, a cow-calf and hay, some type of owned livestock enterprise, whether that's cows or stockers, along with a custom graze business. Oftentimes we see those that work really well. The custom grazers offer some more flexibility, but they're really essentially they pair up very well, right? We're set up to run cows. We're set up to run somebody else's cows, right? So that piece can work well. Sometimes people that are running their own livestock, but then also sending livestock out with somebody else, right? So okay, hey, I'm in this business and I'm also going to expand. I'm not going to expand by buying more land. I'm going to expand by buying more animals and sending them out with people that I could trust to take care of them. So those kind of things that I would say, pair up well. So they're going to use similar skill sets, similar contacts, similar networks to help each other out. Yeah.
Sure. And kind of all the way on the other end of the spectrum, as far as a diversity of enterprises, would be, the guy that's running cows and sheep, and he's got a layer enterprise and a broiler enterprise and a pig, enterprise. They're marketing some pork and trying to direct market all of those things. And obviously we can give examples on both sides of people that are doing that well and people that are not doing that well. But is that kind of the diversity of enterprise, the ultimate diversity of enterprise thing that you're talking about when you say maybe let's be cautious here before we go down that trail?
That's a good example of it, right? So I've described this before, and I think we have to understand we come to these states with good intentions, right? So maybe I started off running a few cows, right, and I'm looking around, I'm looking for information, and I find something that says, well, really, if you want to maximize this thing, you should be direct marketing your meat, right? So I go from running a few cows to, okay, now I'm finishing cattle, right? So I've got a cow-calf business that flows into my stocker enterprise. My stocker enterprise flows into my finishing enterprise. My finishing enterprise sells to my meat marketing division. My meat marketing division delivers the beef to consumers, right? So now I've really already got, what is that, 4 or 5 enterprises just to sell beef to somebody, right? So now I'm selling beef to somebody, and that's going all right. I'm showing up to my customer and I'm delivering them some beef. And while I'm delivering them beef, they say, well, do you have any pork? Right. And so I go home and I think, well, I could put a little pin here. I could raise some pigs here. Right. So now I start raising a few pigs, and now my customers want chicken. So now I'm back and I've got a few chickens, and now I'm doing layers, and now I've, and then they want some produce to go with it. Now I've got a garden. Right. So you can see where this goes is a well-intended, start down this road. And then what happens is these folks come to us, and right, you can almost see it when they walk in the room. They're extremely stressed. There's a lot going on inside the business, and from a business perspective, it's extremely difficult to put your finger on what's actually creating substantial parts of the revenue. Where are my costs going, right? What does the overhead structure of the business look like, right? Yeah, I might sit down with a business that's doing $3 million in sales, and we can, like a traditional, a simplified business is doing $3 million in sales, and we can break that business apart and put our finger on it within about 2 or 3 hours of working on it. I might sit down with a diversified business that's doing $200,000 in gross revenue, and 14 hours later, we still haven't figured out where things are coming from, right? It economically, financially, those businesses are extremely hard to actually put your finger on what is working, what is not. And then the operators are just completely wrung out, right? I mean, they're so busy running from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to try to keep all these plates spinning. I say plate spinning, the guy at the fair with the pole and the plate spinning on top of it. That's the image I get when I see these businesses, right? Is somebody running around trying to keep all these different plates spinning in the air, and nothing. They don't know. Very little is actually working well, and very little is working at scale. Right. They came to this with good intentions, right? They want to take care of the land. They want to serve their community. They want to provide people wholesome food. But from a business perspective, actually, I'll be as bold to say I've never seen one of those that's working well. I have yet to see somebody that puts one of those on the table and says, "Hey, look at this. This thing's really humming." I've seen pieces of those that are working well, but not a whole thing.
Right. And I mean, that's one of the things that you teach in the Ranching for Profit school is we got to find the dead wood.
Yeah.
Right. And so where we might be thinking, well, my layer enterprise and my broiler enterprise and my sheep enterprise, those are all just other branches on this tree. But really, would it be more accurate to say they're a whole nother tree with its own whole other set of dead wood that we have to find and cut out?
It sure could be. It sure could be. So I mentioned this earlier, but the way we look at it is when we start doing direct sales to customers, we create a marketing division, right? So my production division sells the products of my production division to my marketing division. My marketing division buys those at some kind of wholesale price. Like, so if I've got a finished beef ready to go, I could sell that to somebody, right? Now, the dollars I get for that are going to vary, but we essentially need to value that animal on the hoof, right? So now my marketing division buys is in quotes, right? Buys that animal from my production division. And now I'm going to take it, have it processed, get it packaged, maybe to bring it back home, put it in freezers, have websites, have farmers markets, right? Have all these additional costs to deliver that product to a consumer, right? So it's really a different business. It's now if I'm running a beef cow calf herd and I sell 5 animals a year to friends and family and they're buying them as halves, I don't need all this complication that I'm describing. It's when I cross that line from, okay, I'm actually going to turn this thing into its own business, right? I'm going to have a website. People are going to be able to place orders from me, right? I'm going to go to some effort to actually start creating a business here. Now we need to draw some lines. So.
Yeah, certainly. So what would the 2 or 3 things that are working well, would you recommend people just start over with a clean slate, or how do you go about finding out, hey, this is the thing that we're geographically advantaged to do, or whatever, our network makes this the thing that we should be doing? Is that kind of the approach you would say for those who've been on this diversified business route? They should start examining it from that perspective and do the things that are working well and stop doing the things that aren't.
Yeah, easy for me to say, isn't it? Sitting over here,
right?
So, it's a difficult change when we come to do it. We've had several clients that have made this change over time. So I really think it starts with pulling up and asking some deep level questions, right? Okay, who are we? What are we about? What is our mission, right? What is the mission of our business? Am I a beef producer that's selling meat direct to people because I think that's a path to profitability? Or am I really a beef marketer who my heart and passion is selling beef to people, and I'd like to sell my animals. I'd like to sell my neighbor's animals, right? Whatever that is, right? Who are you? What are you about, right? At your core, what gets you fired up, right? We talk to a lot of these people that are doing more of the direct sales because they think that's a way to profitability, right? Or a way to keep the doors open on the ranch, or maybe it was an excuse to add another generation to the family, right? Oh, if we're going to bring these kids home, we better start doing this so we can create enough revenue to support them, right? So when that's the motivation, we often find that, if your heart and soul's really not in it, you don't get up excited to make phone calls to talk to people or check the emails to see what the orders have come in, right? If that's not where your heart and soul is, maybe focus on what you're good at, right? What your passions are. And I hear a lot of people say, well, we need to do a better job marketing. Well, you can do a good job marketing and not be in direct sales, right? You can look at, okay, what are opportunities to add value to these animals, and more from the commodity side of it, right? We see a lot of good people or people that have success practicing the sell by marketing techniques, right? Or other ways to be aware of your marketing. Right? I watch Burke Tiger talk about being a good job marketing. He's not talking about putting a stand out on the side of the road, right, with a lemonade stand. That's not what he's talking about when he says marketing, right? He's talking about looking what are the products that are coming through your business, whether that's cull cows or your animals, right? And how do we do a good job getting top value for everything that's leaving the ranch? Right. So I think we need to be careful about telling everybody that they need to be in direct sales. I think that does many of our clients a disservice because they don't wake up every day wanting to talk to a consumer about their product. Right. And when we put people in a spot that doesn't align with their passions. Right. So I think it's a long way of saying, figure out what your mission and vision is and what's your competitive advantage, right? If you live 300 miles from a place to get animals processed, right? That's certainly a disadvantage from the producer that's selling into that lives next to a population center that hauls them 20 miles to get them processed, right? So what do your resources allow you to do? What does your heart and soul get you excited to do? And let's lean into those things.
So basically, we're back to talking about people.
We have circled around, haven't we, Clay? So there's another piece on this diversity side that I think is a really useful look into it. And that has to do, so Clay, that we break businesses down into enterprises and we look at gross margin by enterprise. Okay. When you're looking at adding diversity, I think there's a really important testing question to put onto that, right? So somebody on your team, somebody on your ranch comes forward and says, I think we should do X, right? And you say, awesome. Wow, that's a great idea, right? I hope you keep bringing good ideas. Let's play with that, right? So you take all these different diversity questions and you throw them on the board and you run through scenarios of, okay, what does it look like in year 1, in year 2, in year 3? When this enterprise is up and running, it must produce a gross margin of at least X, or it's just a distraction, right? So what I'm saying is, when you're starting something up, it's probably not going to be successful 6 months out, right? But once you've got this thing running and it's running at scale, if you're a $1 million business, having something produce a gross margin of $5,000 is totally a distraction, right? I mean, we don't need to spend time and effort doing this thing to see an additional $5,000 of gross margin. We could have one thing sneeze over here and that's going to change $5,000 of gross margin, right? So let's not chase this. I was on a tour one time of a really cool corn soybean place somewhere in eastern Kansas. And they were selling like $10 million of corn and soybeans. And the whole tour was about these 25 chickens they had standing over here in the corner. And I'm like, really? I actually ran the gross revenue on the chickens, and the gross revenue on the chickens represented like less than 1% of the total equipment value on the farm, right? So, I mean, if we had one additional breakdown on a machine, it would totally wipe out all the gross margin received from the whole chickens, right? So I'm like, from a business standpoint, does this really matter? Right? Yeah, it might be a cool hobby if they enjoy doing it, but for everybody's sitting around saying, "Oh, isn't this great?" And I'm like, this is totally a distraction. So, right? So what people have to figure out is, what is that gross margin for themselves? What is that X? Right? If we're going to do a business that has a gross margin of, after 2 or 3 years, if it's doing $300,000 of gross margin, okay, I'm interested in this thing. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see what it takes to get to that scale. But if we run a scenario out and, okay, if we add this to our enterprise mix and 2 or 3 years later when this thing's up and running at scale, this is really just noise, right? Then clean it out. The only difference, the only thing that I would say is an exception to that is, maybe we have this enterprise that supports another piece of what we do, right? So let me pick on like on-farm events, right? So let's say I'm doing some kind of a direct sales and I have on-farm events. Maybe the gross margin from the on-farm events doesn't actually move the needle, but it really is what's driving my direct sales, right? So, okay, I'll take a cruddy gross margin over here because it's creating a really nice gross margin over here. Right. So I think that's the exception to that. But doing something just to do it, to add a couple $1,000 of a sizable business, is totally just noise.
Yeah. At that point, the on-farm event almost becomes a marketing tool for the direct sales business, right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, C90 Ocean Minerals. C90 brings the power of sea energy agriculture to your farm or ranch. Using the principles discovered by Dr. Maynard Murray, C90 harnesses the power of the ocean to remineralize your soil, increase pasture nutrient density, and raise healthier livestock. C90 is perfect for all livestock and can help you unlock the genetic potential of your herd. Available nationwide at Tractor Supply, plus give their team a call to learn more about their new spore-based soil biological input and help take your soil fertility to the next level. Visit c-90.com or call 717-580-1458 today. C90, a wave of nutrition. It kind of comes down to know and understand yourself and also don't be influenced by the influencers. Just because the guy with the platform has 5 enterprises, direct marketing, all of them to consumers, doesn't mean that's going to be your path, especially in more brittle environments in the West and some of the challenges that come along with that. Maybe that place isn't made for that. That's one of my arguments with sheep all the time. It's like everybody will accuse people who are expecting cows to graze through the winter and do all those things, that, well, you're trying to make them into deer. Well, a sheep basically is a deer. It's an animal that's already adapted to the environment, and yes, cows can do it. Cows can do the work. That's the whole ethos of working cows. We can find those animals that will work in our environment, and they probably won't win any of the local shows necessarily, but they're a different cow than the ones that do well in other places. Yep. Right? But yep. we have to resist those influences even within the regenerative space, right? We have to resist the influence that would say your cow needs to weigh 1,800 pounds and wean a 750-pound calf before she's actually profitable. And I think probably the same way we need to resist the influence of somebody who says you need to have 5 meat enterprises from 5 different species and direct market them all to the largest population center in your region. Is that kind of lining up with what you're saying?
It is. Yeah. I just want to point out to people that, we see a lot of pressure on these things of, hey, we should all be looking to do this thing. And, I don't see a lot of those highly diversified businesses. That's an understatement. I don't see any of those highly diversified businesses that work well, that are doing those things. It's a lot of noise. There is one piece we haven't covered of this too, and it's more for those startup operations, right? Because you see a lot of people who are trying to get going or making this a side hustle that are doing more of the direct marketing, and one important piece to consider is the cash flow implications on that design of a business. Right? I feel like I'm slamming on the direct marketers. I don't mean to be slamming on the direct marketers, but I'm a bit on a soapbox here, so bear with me. When you let's go back to that person who, okay, I'm branching as a side hustle, right? I've got a dozen cows, and I've decided I'm going to sell the progeny of those cows as finished animals through like a farmer's market or a direct market or thing. Okay. So cash flow implications of that, right? So I had to buy the cows. I had to graze the cows to wean a calf. That essentially takes a year, right? From when I keep a bred cow to when I wean a calf, right? So I've now got a year of paying all the costs to run that cow. Now, when I get to that point of a weaned calf, do I have cash flow? Well, just a little bit, right? I might get a cull animal or a calf that doesn't fit my product. And then I've got to run those calves a whole nother year, pay all the costs of carrying them, right? Do I get cash flow now? Probably not, right? Maybe a little bit from a cull animal again, right? So from a cash flow implication, if we actually want to have this thing creating cash flow and turning the wheel, when you're starting a business, cash flow is the number one priority, right? It's not economics. Economics has to work, but you need cash flow, right? That is your number one need. And so when you're doing something that has a long timeline from point A to when you get the money, that no wonder you got to subsidize it with an off-farm job, right? So what I'm saying is, if you want to do one of these types of businesses, look for something that has a quick turnover. That I can buy it at this point, and 3 months later, I've got something ready to sell, right? So with several of the more like direct to consumer type of businesses we see, once they start analyzing their business and breaking it down, they often find that, hey, if I enjoy this marketing stuff and I'm good at it, where I really create value is taking if we use beef as the example, taking like a 900-pound animal that one of my neighbors raises that fits my message, right? I'm not saying go against your message. It fits my message of locally grown, right? Antibiotic free, whatever your messages are. So I can buy that animal from my neighbor. In 3 months from now, I've got an animal that's ready to slaughter. Now I get it processed. I deliver it to my consumers, and I rinse and repeat, and I hit the gas on that, right? So on a place that I could run 13 cows on and run them from conception to consumption, now I can do 65 faster turn animals, right? That are actually creating cash flow for me and helping hit the gas on this thing. So that's what many people who actually start looking inside of these businesses see is, hey, I'm really good at this part. What does it look like to lean into that?
Yeah. I think back to talking to Lee and Art McElroy, and, they mentioned that in a normal, or what they try to do every year, is at least 2 turns of sell by marketing. And this year, given moisture and everything else, they're going to be able to do 4, and so where you compare that and contrast it with the sell by or the direct to consumer marketing, and you've got a year plus wrapped up into some of those animals before you can market them, and that becomes a cash flow question.
Yeah.
So I want to pitch the positive side, the positive vision, what do we do? What are some of the things that can help us determine what we should be doing, what we should be pursuing? How can we go about looking at what we're already doing and finding out what's working and some of those things?
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So what's your starting place? Where would you have people start to try and figure out where they need to step on the gas and do more of that, and maybe pump the brakes and do less of something else?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In fact, so we just came off a school here that we were in Reno last week, and I'm thinking of some of the people that were in that school and some of the conversations that we had in the evening, and that whole piece of mission and vision. Right at the school, we teach the ICA process as a way to really dig into somebody and say, at your core, what do you want? What do you want this place to be? And when we start asking those questions, we tend to get some things that really pull forward from people, and everybody's different, right? I mean, I can't sit here and say this is what most of them are, but I mean, so let's take somebody who might be doing that, and they might say, I really want to see the people in my community be able to get, fresh, healthy food from this region, and maybe it's protein products from this region. Okay, great. So I want to be part of that conduit. Okay, so now we start looking into the business. This is usually when we come back to the enterprise analysis and break the business apart, and you might see that inside of your business you've got maybe 12 things that are going on in this business, and of those 12, 3 are really working well. I've got this, and this, right? And so we're going to go, okay, great. And guess what? Those are the 3 I actually enjoy too, which is oftentimes what we find, right? Is that the things that people actually have their passions aligned with are the things that are working well. Okay, so what if we found other people in our community that would do the other 7 things that are on this list, right? There's somebody down the road that's raising this that fits what I want to do. There's somebody else here. Maybe I use my marketing channels that I've already developed to put their products through that, right? And then I'm going to lean into doing these things. Okay. And so for many of those businesses, what they might see is their workload drops by 50%. Right. Okay. If we got rid of all that stuff, now when I go outside in the morning, instead of having 12 different things to do, right, I've got 3 or 4 things to do. Okay. So I go and do those 3 or 4 things, and now I redeploy that created time in, okay, how do I make these things even better? So that's what we find the positive is it starts with mission and vision. Why do you do it? What are you about at your core? Then it moves to economic analysis. Let's break down, what is actually working in the business. And then we make some decisions about, okay, what are we going to call? What are we going to keep doing? And then because those new things are always going to come about, right? well, maybe we should do this now. Great. And I think those things should be a part of the discussion, right? We don't want to be a business that just shoots down everything, right? Then we're the old grumpy guy at the thing, right? We won't do that. But as those things come up, how do we vet them and test them so that the things we actually implement are the things that have opportunity to really move the needle?
Are those things that can be vetted, kind of over the course of a single meeting, or I suppose that you kind of come up with a roadblock? We got to answer this question to know whether or not this is going to work, and then you do some more research and come back with your findings and those kinds of things. But this would be something that's generally handled on the ranch in the course of a WATB meeting. Is that right?
So my experience of pulling up alongside with people and doing this is through the EL program. In Executive Link, I would say that process probably takes 1.5 years. Right. So it's definitely not going to be handled in a single meeting. That we might be able to do a vision in 2 half-day meetings, right? But the whole pieces of identifying the mission, that's probably going to be a few meetings in itself. Identifying the vision, that's probably going to be a few meetings in itself. And then completing the economic analysis, that'll probably be over a course of a time period, depending on the complexity of the business, and then really zeroing in on, okay, what is it that's working well? That will take some time. And then the hardest part is making the decision to call, right? Because you started all these things, you've got sunk costs in doing all these things. We've got clients that expect us to do these things, right? So that's probably the hardest part is the culling decision of, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're not going to do. Are we going to outsource those things we're not going to do, or are we just not going to do them? That's probably the hardest part.
Yeah.
So, and the ones that we've been able to pull up alongside of and be a part of it's going to take some time to do that. And obviously it varies. The scale of the business, the more established it is, the harder it is to make those changes.
So over the course of a couple of meetings you're talking about, are you saying in an EL meeting, or is this something that's happening on the ranch, or a combination of the two?
It could be either. Most of the time, the mission and the vision should be on the ranch. They're best when done with facilitation, but they don't have to be. But the other meetings of looking at the economics, those can be done at EL meetings.
Yeah. Do you have recommended facilitators? I mean, are there people that you send out from RMC to do the facilitation, or people in your local area, or somebody you trust, or how do you go about finding those?
Yeah. So we do have some members of our team that'll do that for folks. I would say that's probably the minority. A lot of them, and now granted, the ones I get to work with are the ones I get to see do this are the ones in the EL program, right? So oftentimes people in Executive Link will either use one of our facilitators, or they might ask somebody that's on their board to come do it with them. I think it was you that interviewed Bart Carmichael, and they talked about doing that with one of their other board mates, right? They came and did it for them, and then they swapped roles and did it for somebody else. So you can kind of share that with another ranching family that you trust. So.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I do. Yep. That was Bart and Pat Guptill that did that for each other. So yep. For sure. So can you kind of give me some of the elements that should be present in a mission and vision statement? Some of the things that you think at a minimum we need to make sure that we have included these things?
Sure. Yeah. So mission and vision, they often get confused. They're different things. Mission answers the question of why. Mission answers the question of why. Mission is the purpose of your business. Okay, why does your business exist? I think a clear mission statement. So a mission statement is really the product of this effort to define our mission. A clear mission statement really should be maybe 5 words, right? We do this, this, and this. Okay. So everybody in your business should be able to say, like, if I walked up to somebody who's fairly low level in your business and said, well, what's the purpose of your business? They might be able to tell me, well, we do this, this, and this. Okay. Working Cows podcast. We're about producing quality content for people who work on ranches, right? I don't know if that's what your mission is or not, but like something like that, just so it's just right there on the tip of your tongue. Okay. Mission says, what is the purpose of your business? Now the vision, this is where the key ownership group, perhaps some key employees included as well, really sit back and we paint that picture of what does this thing look like, right? And the focus question we use to help people get there is 5 years from now, in my perfect world, what do I want this place to be, right? And so now we start painting, okay, it's going to run these enterprises, it's going to be operating at this scale, it's going to have these people working here, this is what the land's going to look like, this is what so it's really putting the details on the it's the blueprint. Okay. If the mission is what kind of house are we building? Are we building a cabin? Are we building a house to raise a big family? That's the mission. The vision is the blueprint, right? Okay. Here's the size of the rooms. Here's here's how many bedrooms it'll have. Here's how many bathrooms, right? So you need both of those things. You need the why, what's the purpose of the thing? And then we also need, okay, here's the plan. Here's what the plan looks like, which is the vision. And we do that through the ICA. Once you have the vision done, this is where a lot of people drop the ball. You have this vision done that says, okay, our ranch is going to be, run, quality cattle that fit this ranch. We're going to be a cow-calf operation that's respected in the area. We're going to have a, clear position agreements for all involved. We're going to offer fair compensation for the people that work here. It's going to have clear communication led by competent leadership, right? So we've got all these statements of what the business is going to be. Once we have those, Now we take those statements and we move them into actionable items. So like one of the things I said was, it's going to have fair compensation for all involved. Okay. So tell me, how are we going to measure that? Oh, okay. So we actually need to do that. So we're going to do some kind of a compensation study for what does a ranch hand in Wyoming that's taking care of these kind of resources, right? What's considered fair compensation? And then we're going to compare what we're doing versus that, right? So if we realize that, oh, I'm paying $1,500 a month and everybody else is paying $3,000 a month, I think I need to adjust that if I'm going to stand up and say we offer fair compensation, right? So we take those things and we put them into action.
Certainly, yeah. Helpful outline, I think, for everybody. And so you said that the mission, maybe mission and vision, is something that would be developed over maybe 2 half-day meetings. Did I hear you right?
Yep. That's a good start on it. What we find is once we do those things, with the people in EL, generally they tell me that after a year or two, I come back and revisit them and I've got more clarity than that time I first wrote them. Right. So we get that draft developed during those 2 half-day meetings. And then oftentimes what we find is a year or two later, we're coming back to them and saying, okay, that was a good start. Here's the core of that. And then we're adapting them and changing them.
Sure. One of the things that I realized, and I don't know if this was something that came as a piece of content I consumed or what, but one of the things that I realized is that a good mission and vision statement gives you the ability to say no to good ideas.
100%. You nailed it.
Are there favorite resources that you have come across as far as helping people develop those mission and vision statements?
I really like Simon Sinek's stuff. Find your why,
Okay.
Start with why.
Yep.
I think Simon does a great job breaking those down.
Yep. I've done some of the work with Business Made Simple and Donald Miller. I think his stuff is good too. I don't know if you've seen any of that.
Yes, I love his airplane analogies because, as you know, I'm an airplane nerd. So yeah, he everything in business relates to aviation. If you didn't know,
that's good. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, and then the EL piece of that comes in after you've had that on-ranch experience of a couple of half-day meetings. Would you say that those half-day meetings are happening in succession, kind of a one event that you're setting down and making that, going through that process?
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. I think that's pretty, especially if you're bringing in facilitation, right? While you have that outside person that you've paid to be there, that's part of the excuse for making it a priority. So.
Right. And then the EL, what role would EL play in the typical scenario that you're aware of?
Yeah. So our Executive Link program, which is a follow-up program to the Ranching for Profit School that people have the option of signing up for, what tends to happen in Executive Link is when people are coming in there, oftentimes one of the first things identified as an action plan is to develop a clear mission and vision. So then they leave some of those early meetings with that on their action plan list of, okay, hey, we're meeting with our EL board here and it's March and we just left with an action plan of developing a mission and vision and we're meeting with them again in July and we have to have that to show to them, right? So the EL program often becomes the impetus for having businesses create that mission and vision. And then they come back to that meeting with, hey, we got it done. Here's the product of it. Or we didn't do it. And the board says, well, are you serious about this or not? Right. And then they send them home with it again. And then they usually have it done by the next time. So.
Sure. So what is your perspective on a business's, the necessity of growth in a business? Do you look at it we hear commonly, you got to be growing. You can't stay stagnant. You are either growing or dying. Some of those kind of cliches. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's true in the businesses that you've been able to look into?
Boy, you're really getting at me now on this one. So I've been struggling with this myself. I was at we went to the Dave Ramsey Entre Leadership Summit 2 years ago, and there's people up there on that stage who I look up to and hold up as leaders in this, and I forgot which one of them says it. It might have been Dave himself that says, "If your business is noble, then your duty is to grow." I think that's what he said. I wrote it down. But it was something along those lines. If your business is noble, then your duty is to grow. I think our business is pretty noble, right? I think what we do serves people in a way that provides them value. But at that time, we'd just been through 3 years of about a 30% growth every year, and I was feeling, I feeling a bit like I don't want to get any bigger. Right. Is kind of where I was at that time. And I'm like, we just added some key people to our team, right? Our payroll had gone up substantially. It was a bit scary for me as a business leader. So I was wrestling with that, right? And that comment that he made really, really hit me pretty hard. So I've been wrestling with that. It's been 2 years, obviously. And then I heard somebody else say, growth for growth's sake is a terrible strategy. And I think that's right? If you're just saying, well, I need to grow, when somebody says, well, why? And you say, well, because Dave Ramsey told me to, right? That's a pretty crappy reason to grow.
It's as equally as bad of a reason as I need to add another enterprise because agricultural influencer X told me I needed to.
Exactly. Man, way to connect this to the theme. That's why you're a pro. So this is something I'm wrestling with is what is that right thing? And I don't know that I have put my finger on the answer yet. I do know when I look at other businesses like our business that are much larger, I don't want the problems they have. Right. I'm really happy with our team. I'm happy that we have a core group, right? That we have a lot of trust in each other. And I don't have to have a policy and procedures book a mile long for this company, right? It's just we run it largely on trust and on expectations, right? And I don't know that I want to move to the next level. So I think I'm starting to settle in on the I'm the owner. I can make it the size I want to, and I don't have to listen to Dave Ramsey.
Yep. But I do agree though that if your goals or your mission is noble, then your responsibility is to grow. I do understand that giving more people access to this is a good thing, but then also there's always those compromises that have to be made, right? Like, yeah, you could probably put more of the RMC, RFP content online, but then you lose some of that connection, and you lose some of that ability to make sure, well, is this being used the way that we intend it to? Because then there comes that question of, well, I tried it, I went through their course and it didn't work, and so you always have to balance those things and weigh the pros and the cons and take it through the 6 thinking hats and all those things and decide what direction you're going to go.
Yep. No, that's great feedback. And I maybe that's why we've kind of been leaning into the strategies that we have. We've been, you can call it franchising. We've been licensing our curriculum to other partners that are helping us expand our reach without us having to be the ones to go out there and do the delivery, right? And have the team to do that delivery. So we've got a partnership with Noble. We've got a partnership with, many of your folks might know, Fausto, RFP Mexico. We've got a new partnership that we're getting ready to launch in the UK, in England, which is really exciting. So that's the direction we've been going. We've been growing, but it's not us as RMC having to do all that growth, right? We've been leveraging those key partnerships.
Yeah, certainly. Well, and I think, again, the power of those relationships that you develop at places like RFP or Ranching for Profit and the Executive Link program and getting the opportunity to get that feedback and have the board of directors for your business without having to have a business that is at the scale that warrants a board of directors, I think is a powerful piece of all this too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sure is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, very good. Anything else on this subject that you feel like needs to be said here before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, I think we hit the high points, and I didn't mean to be slamming. So if anybody feels like I was attacking them, I didn't mean to be. Just sharing with you and your audience some of the things that we see. So,
yeah. Well, constructive criticism, right? If we
all right.
If you can get through some constructive criticism, it proves the strength of what you're doing, right?
That's right. I think so. Yeah. Well, thanks again for the work that you do, Clay, and continue to do. It's been awesome to be alongside you as you've had this growth. So congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Appreciate all your input over the years. So thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Take care.
Very good stuff there with Dallas. Really appreciate his perspective and his willingness to challenge some of those preconceived ideas. Oftentimes, we hear from gurus about how we should handle those things, and it's always good to just get another perspective about ways that other people have been successful with these things as well. I also wanted to let you know about an event coming up in Frontier, Saskatchewan. That's southwest Saskatchewan near the Canadian and American borders. I'll be speaking at Bethel Church November 7th, 8th, and 9th. That's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. November 7th at 7 p.m., Friday evening, 7 p.m., November 7th. I'll be speaking there, as well as Saturday evening, November 8th. We'll do a men's breakfast at 7:30 a.m. on Saturday morning, and then the church service at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. And it'll be kind of a bunch of different topics, but mostly centered around regenerative agriculture and how that is our best bet for taking care of the land that God has entrusted to us. Also be sharing my testimony and some of the work that God has done in my life in recent years related to some issues of spiritual depression and some of those things. And so really looking forward to being with the folks there at Bethel Church in Frontier, Saskatchewan. I think be open to the public. You're free to join us if you want to make the trip up, down, over, whatever you would say. Look forward to having my whole family there along with me. And so would love to see you there if you're interested. Coming up next on the Working Cows podcast, we'll be talking to Zach Osborne. Zach is from Rockside Ranch, Great Lakes in Michigan, and we're going to talk to him about some of the ways that they have been seeing their ranch used for life transformation over the years. So very excited to share that with you, coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.